And hello, everybody. Welcome in to a Monday night special of SEC Talk. We moved our show because Wade, he had himself a sported weekend going to the LSU Ole Miss game on Saturday and seeing the Tampa Bay Bucks drop a 50 burger on the New Orleans Saints 51-27. So, Wade, I'm going to go ahead and shut up before we get into SEC football. Talk about how your weekend went.
Yeah, I mean, it was the football doubleheader. Some of our viewers may remember that Tyler and I
Yep.
accomplished that feat once during our college days. We saw Alabama and LSU play a night game and turned around and watched the Saints beat the Los Angeles Rams in a complete thriller. And, those teams ended up playing in the NFC Championship as well that year. We won't talk about that game, but yeah, so it was cool to live it up like old times and see the Tigers play on Saturday night and watch the Saints play Sunday afternoon. And honestly, both were really good games. I mean, obviously, we'll recap the LSU game, but just from a fan's perspective, I mean, the atmosphere was just incredible. And, I thought they did a good job of capturing the 100th year history of Tiger Stadium, but also some of the new age stuff with the lights, and I think they got the colors right with the lights, and it was just really electric. And obviously the game speaks for itself. When you get to overtime, the crowd is just going to take over. Nobody left early. Students rushed the field, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, just out of pure emotion, really. And on Sunday's game for the Black and Gold, another really electric atmosphere. Rashid Shaheed had a punt return for a touchdown. I think that's the first punt return I've seen for a touchdown in person. So that was really cool. And, like with all the turnovers, the fans were really in it. And then the Saints just came out flat after the half. I mean, just a complete dud, and ended up losing 51-27. But that's okay. I had a good time with the guys I was with, and it's always good to be back in the dome. So maybe me and Tyler will catch a game later this season. We're kind of eyeballing that Jaden Daniels return to Louisiana against the Commanders.
Yeah, we're definitely eyeing that one. So we will keep y'all informed. Might have a little bit of content for myself if we do go to that game. Maybe get a little vlog going, just seeing how the game goes. But actually, I want to correct you. That was your second punt return that you saw. I don't know if you remember the Auburn and LSU game when they were down
DJ Chark.
DJ Chark had that punt return for a touchdown. So
right.
Yeah. My memory, I mean, I remember sports, but if you tell me what the heck what I had for breakfast, I couldn't tell you. But let's go ahead.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I told Chase, the guy that I was at the game with, I was like, I think that's the first punt return I've seen. But there's a little part of you that's like, no, I've seen one before, but I couldn't remember it. So there we go. DJ Chark.
All I can remember was that game was hot as hell.
21-0, weren't we?
Yeah, they were down 21-0, and my gosh, that was probably one of the hottest games I've ever been to. It was like in mid-September, and it was feeling on the field like 120 in the stands. It was feeling honestly like that too. It was definitely boiling. But what a week it was again for SEC football. Last week we were pretty much talking about Vanderbilt's upset in Alabama. We almost had another upset with South Carolina beating Alabama this week. I have an overtime game between Florida and Tennessee. We had Vanderbilt going on the road. Then we had the Red River rivalry for the first time in the SEC, and it was an absolute spanking by Texas. We'll get to that later on the show, if it's Texas and everybody else in the SEC. But let's go ahead and get right into our SEC talk here, as we always do. Let me go ahead and present here, and we will get things going here as we recap week 7 and look ahead to week 8. It's already crazy that we're already talking about week 8, but that's just how the college football season works. So let's go on to our AP top 25 poll. And the number one team remains the same after their 34-3, a dominating performance by the Longhorns. Keep them at number 1. Just outside of the nation, Oregon did move up to 2. Penn State is 3. So those are your top 3. So you have 2 Big Ten teams. You have Ohio State at 4. And you have Georgia at 5. They struggled a little bit with Mississippi State. The score 41-31. We will definitely we won't talk about that game. We'll talk about it more on SEC fantasy because you did have Georgia's defense. And then number 7, Alabama, they did remain the same, even though with the struggle against South Carolina, they remain at number 7. The big movers is LSU. I'm just noticing Texas A&M has LSU's logo.
Hey, we own them. We own them.
Yeah, but number 8, LSU, they are definitely one of the bigger movers here in this AP poll. Number 11, Tennessee, they actually fell. So that's definitely shocking to see. Tennessee fall even in overtime win against Florida, but Alabama stays the same. I'll definitely ask you that question. Number 14, Texas A&M, they're on the bye. They remain the same. And then number 18, Ole Miss, they're definitely our bigger fallers. And then number 19, Missouri, they had a nice little road trip to Massachusetts, and they got the victory 45-3. So I think I'm in the boat of if you're going to drop Tennessee after they barely beat Florida, then why is Alabama still at 7?
Yeah, I think the voters have the conundrum of Alabama beat Georgia, and you don't want to keep those two teams very far apart. Even though right now Alabama's not passing the eye test, it's hard to drop them. Tennessee, they certainly have kind of stumbled offensively since their hot start, and they didn't do anything to deserve to necessarily fall. Like you said, they won, but to me, it's okay. I mean, I don't think that team's playing like a top 10 team right this moment. So if they find their footing, they'll climb back up their rankings, and they have a chance to prove it this weekend. So look for these teams to switch places based on the result of the game potentially. And then Texas and Georgia are playing. So we got a lot of action at the top, and then Alabama and LSU will shake itself out, as well LSU and A&M. So, I mean, I think all the dust is going to settle here in just the next couple of weeks. I mean, we need to see these teams play head-to-head. Right now, we only have Georgia and Alabama to go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were really on a stretch of having 9 teams with Oklahoma's loss. Now that they have 2 losses on the season, the AP poll has now dropped them out. So we'll see if the Sooners can get back up. They are on the bye. No, they're not on the
Put
bye.
Vanderbilt in the poll, man.
Yeah, I know that Vanderbilt. They definitely. I mean, they got a top 10 victory against Alabama. They beat Kentucky, who played well. Who beat Ole Miss, who played
And
well.
almost beat Georgia.
Yeah, who almost beat Georgia too. So that's very puzzling that Vanderbilt's not in the top 25. So maybe they need one more victory. Maybe if they can defeat Ball State this weekend, they'll get right back into it. But movers of the pool outside of that, how about Army? They're in the top 25. Boise State, they're moving up after a big victory against Hawaii. So I know that we're mainly SEC show, but we're definitely going to talk more as we get to the month of November and closer to the college football playoff, what's going outside of the country. But for here in the conference, we have 8 teams in the AP Top 25 poll heading into week number 8. And like you mentioned, we have Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee this weekend, and then LSU, Arkansas, and then so forth and so on. So this could definitely change as we move forward. So now let's go on to our reminder. If you have any questions pertaining to SEC football, because it was another crazy weekend of SEC football here in the conference. We definitely enjoy the new look of it with Oklahoma and Texas coming into here. So feel free to leave us a comment in the comment section down below, and we will get to it after the end of the show after a hot topic segment. All right, so let's get into everyone's favorite SEC fantasy week 7 results. Wade, we'll see how your team did, but like I mentioned, you did have Georgia's defense. And looking at the score, you are not too pleased with, once again, having a defense that really can't produce for you.
No, and I was sitting in Tiger Stadium. Garrett Nussmeier was honestly playing pretty bad. He had some yardage, but he ended up really improving his stat line as the game went on and clutched up at the end. But they were showing highlights of the Georgia game, and at first it showed that Mississippi State had 10, and I was like, well, that's a bad showing for Georgia. Like, Mississippi State's god awful. Like, they shouldn't score 10 points on that defense. Well, then it was 17, then it was 24, all the way to 31. So very disappointing for Georgia. And at the moment, Nussmeier had like 250 total yards. So I was like, all right, I see the writing on the wall here. I'm going to end up in the negatives because I'd already checked Isaiah Bond's stats, and he only had 5 yards. And my running back didn't even play. So luckily I got the substitute there in Marcus Carroll, and he had a good game. but yeah, let's do the math. Garrett Nussmeier, 353 yards. I mean, he was the SEC Offensive Player of the Week, but that was largely, in fact, due to his heroics on the last drive of the game and then the overtime possession. And then Marcus Carroll, he did well filling in for Nate Noel. I'm not really sure what the story is there, but I imagine that
it was
Noel just kind of
UMass.
had a
It was probably just a precaution injury. I mean,
yeah.
Marcus
I mean,
Carroll,
playing
though,
UMass.
really nice game for them, though. So that was a good compliment that you had to replace Nate Noel.
Yeah. Carroll did everything that I would have asked Noel to do. And I think we saw this Missouri offense finally feel comfortable and balanced. And,
I actually
maybe
saw
you need a
Luther
get right
Burden
game.
catch a ball.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe that's what they needed to get everybody going for this critical SEC stretch. So, not too shabby there. Isaiah Bond, I mean, he was just largely taking out the game. I guess that Texas just kind of knew Oklahoma would scheme against them, and Texas just looked other ways. And sometimes that's a really good compliment as a receiver, just to take yourself out the game and open up routes for your teammates. And it didn't slow down Texas one bit as they routed Oklahoma 34-3. And the Georgia defense, well, I mean, 385 yards, not what you want when you pick Georgia. Not in the 400s, so it's a positive. But once again, I barely hang on to the positives at 64 yards.
Yeah, you're definitely in the positives, so that's definitely a good sign. I thought that, seeing Georgia defense, but once I was doing the math, you were Garrett Nussmeier. Nussmeier definitely saved you because Isaiah Bond did not have himself a game. He actually got injured in this one, if you're wondering why he only had 5 yards. So he only played for a quarter. So that's just the beauty, and that's just
how it goes.
SEC fantasy giveth, and SEC fantasy can take it away. It's just like if you play fantasy football. So now let's go on to my team and see if my team can continue to roll, or if you can get back on track and get yourself a win here. So let's see how my team did. Quinn Ewers, I mean, he did have a little bit of rust in the first half, a shaky start for him. I was thinking are we going to see Arch Manning in this game? We ultimately didn't, but Quinn Ewers, 202 total yards. He did have 199 and only 3 rushing yards. So the 3 rushing yards gets him over 202 yards. Cedric Alexander, not too shabby performance against a really good Kentucky defense, 58 total yards for them. As Vanderbilt, they got their big victory in Lexington. And Kyron Lacey, the receiver of the weekend, got the game-winning touchdown against Ole Miss, and he had himself a big day. Garrett Nussmeier was looking to him. Aaron Anderson also would have been a good pick for SEC fantasy, but Kyron Lacey continues to thrive, and he's just going to be the next NFL wide receiver, the Malik Neighbors, the Justin Jeffersons of the world. So Kyron Lacey having himself a heck of a season. And Missouri defense, there we go, 237 yards. That's all I said. Last week, you can just play it over again. I just wanted Missouri to get under 250. That's exactly what they did. So Missouri defense, check mark. They're gone for me for SEC fantasy. They definitely did me duties. And once again, I take it 134-64 in a low scoring game. The couple of last weeks have been a low scoring. My position players haven't done so well. Your defense hasn't done so well either. So once again, I take the victory. So let's get to our rules segment, and then we'll have a recap of how we're doing in SEC fantasy. What's the totals? What's the teams that we have used so far, and the position players. So SEC fantasy rules: 1 quarterback, a running back, a receiver, a defense, and then our 2 special rules that we use every single week: cannot draft the same player twice in back-to-back weeks. And once you draft the defense, you can't use them again. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and knock off the screen here for a couple of minutes. I'm going to go ahead and let Wade take over and see how SEC fantasy has been going for this season, as we're now heading almost into week 8 and with week 7 in the books. So I'm going to go ahead, put this on the screen. So why don't you take it away with how SEC fantasy has gone this season so far?
Yeah, just as we state in the rules, we cannot reuse a defense, and it would be a pretty steep task to track all that in your head. So I thought we would just give it a breakdown of who we've selected so far this season and who we haven't, and who we have left to play with. So in yellow are teams that we have used. So down the stretch, and this includes this week's games. So Tyler is going to have the pick between Arkansas, Auburn, Kentucky, LSU, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M for his defenses, where I still have the big dogs of Texas and Tennessee, two of the top defenses in the conference, as well as the likes of Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and A&M. So gone are Georgia, gone are Alabama, gone are some teams that we are happy are gone. But yeah, still lots of football left to play. But just, that was an added wrinkle that we put into SEC Fantasy this year to try to get all teams represented. Individual player-wise, we're both in pretty good shape there. We each have about 4 schools that we need to knock out. Interestingly enough, nobody has taken a Kentucky player or a Kentucky defense, so we got to get the Wildcats on here at some point.
Yeah, I definitely think looking at this, you obviously have the advantage in the defenses that you've already have. Like I've already used, like you mentioned, some of the big dogs like Texas. We've both used Georgia and Alabama. So I think that going down the stretch, if you're gonna, bounce back, you definitely have the defenses. Like you both have Texas A&M, but I'm ultimately gonna have to use like an Auburn defense or Kentucky defense down the stretch. So it's definitely gonna be exciting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, for sure. We'll just have to see. I mean, sometimes a team can have a good week and they just let up a lot of yards. So it's just kind of a week-to-week thing, and hopefully you get the right team. I mean, I'm due for one, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you get it this week. We'll get to that in a few minutes of who you're going to be picking. So now let's get to the overall totals of how things have shaped out, as you see there. I mean, if you've been keeping up with us, I'm just on a heater in SEC fantasy.
Yes, you are.
1,492 to 1,043. I mean, that could definitely get made up. But I am the most thing that I'm proud of, knock on wood. None of us have been in the negatives. So that is your score total of the off season. So Wade, what's your strategy to try to make this up?
Like you said, a big week can really turn this around. Actually, the only week I've won, I did beat you by 250 yards. So that's kind of kept me in the ball game. And if I have another week like that, I mean, we're talking a player or two away from maybe tying this thing up. So we got a lot of football left. Overall record wise, I mean, you'll probably get me on the season, but total yardage, I think I'm still in the hunt if I pick the right guys.
Yeah, definitely. So you just need a big week. And keep in mind, this point total is just for the regular season. I know we have for the bowl season, but everything will just wash away and we'll have overall winner of the bowl season because, like I mentioned, the bowl season is double the players. It's definitely going to be more interesting with the 12-team college football playoff. We usually do New Year's 6. But now the New Year's 6 is pretty much just going to be pick a team who's in the college football playoff. So hopefully you have a plethora of teams to choose from. Then we'll have the regular bowl games, which is definitely going to be more difficult. I feel like there's going to be more opt-outs, especially since there's no more New Year's 6 bowl games. I feel like if you don't make the playoff, not many people are going to want to play in that bowl game. So that will definitely be tricky for us to keep track of. But that is your overall scores. Is there anything else that we need to recap before?
No,
All
I
right.
think that's it for now. Let's get our week. What are we on? 7 picks?
Yeah, week number 8. SEC fantasy drafts. I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to our main slideshow here. So there you have it. There's the rules. Now let's get into the quarterbacks. You're going to go with a new quarterback here in SEC fantasy, Connor Weigman, the quarterback out of Texas A&M, coming off of a bye. You do have Mississippi State. Garrett Nussmeier, he's back. He was with you. He did pretty well with you last week against Ole Miss. He gets Arkansas. So talk about Connor Weigman's matchup. And what could be another high-scoring game in Starkville between Texas A&M and Mississippi State?
Yeah, I think there is high-scoring potential here, and I was just looking at what Wagman did against Missouri, and he really reasserted himself as A&M's quarterback. There was a lot of chatter about Marcel Reed taking over, and deservedly so. Reed did a nice job in relief of Wagman while he was out with an injury, but he came in and just really dominated, and there's no way you can turn away from him. I think we'll see, Reed and maybe some packages, but this is his football team. and I think he's a good bet to go for over 300 yards. Carson Beck put
Mhm.
up 450 yards on Mississippi State. I'm not expecting that, but I think he could get me 300.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Connor Weigman coming off of a very terrific performance against Missouri, so we'll see if he can continue that momentum. I'm going to go Garrett Nussmeier. It is a tricky matchup. It's a night game in Fayetteville against a very talented defense, but Garrett Nussmeier has proven in these type of games that he can just sling it. So if he can do what he did with 353, I mean, that would be great. But at least 300 yards is what I'm looking for Garrett Nussmeier. So we'll see if I can get it. But who knows? This is a crazy rivalry game. You don't know if it's just going to be a defensive battle or could it be like a 45-40 game. You just never know how crazy this rivalry game is. So Garrett Nussmeier, I haven't chosen him in a couple of weeks, so he's back on the roster. So Weigman and Nussmeier, your two quarterbacks here, SEC Fantasy. Now let's go on to the running backs. You're just going with some new faces here. We did see an Oklahoma running back. I picked Gavin Sawchuk. That was all the way back in week number 1. He didn't do so well. Looks like Devontae Barnes is taking over that role, so you're going with him. Can't and then the next one, I mean, Dylan Sampson. I feel like he's pretty much like our Rocket Sanders of SEC fantasy this
Yeah.
week. How many times that he's been selected? So talk about Javonte Barnes, how their matchup is facing.
Yeah, going with a new guy here, like you said, Javonte Barnes. I needed to start getting some representation on some of the other teams. So I'm going to start chipping away at that week by week. And Barnes is a guy who has really grown into his own for Oklahoma. I know they have a running quarterback now, so Hawkins is going to account for a lot of Oklahoma's yardage. But if this team really wants to find their footing and salvage this season, they have to be more balanced. It can't be the quarterback runs 20 times a game. They're going to have to hand the ball off and get some yardage so that they can start to push the ball downfield through the air. So I think a matchup that's very favorable here against Auburn is a good chance to do that. Or I'm sorry, they're not playing
South
Auburn.
Carolina. I finally remembered who they were
Yeah,
playing.
South Carolina. They did have good offensive luck against Auburn. But yeah, same thing. Against South Carolina, that's a team that you should be able to, at home, establish your offense against. The Gamecocks look good against Alabama, but this is still a defense with a lot of holes. And I just look back to what Caden Durham was able to do for LSU. And if they can use Barnes in any sort of role like that, just to dump it off and build your quarterback's confidence up, I think he could be in for a pretty good day, a breakout game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go Dylan Sampson. Another big game from him against the Florida Gators, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I feel like back-to-back weeks, it feels like that running backs have done very well. Cedric Alexander, he had himself a game. I mean, Vanderbilt was able to run all over Alabama's defensive front, and we saw Raheem Sanders have himself a good day. So I think that Dylan Sampson, he just can continue what he's been doing all season. He's been one of the best running backs in the SEC, along with Le'Veon Moss out of A&M. So Sampson and Barnes are your two running backs. Let's go on to two talented receivers. There he is, Luther Burden. This is only the second time that he's been picked in SEC fantasy, which is just bizarre to me. But he gets a good matchup, I believe, with Auburn this week.
Yes, they're the ones playing Auburn.
Yes, so it's the Battle of the Tigers. Andrew Armstrong, I went with him going up against LSU secondary, which honestly played pretty well considering the circumstances against Ole Miss. So talk about Luther Burns' matchup in the Tiger Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a exploitable matchup, and Missouri, this offense hasn't been as good as we wanted it to be, but I think they found out a little bit about themselves against UMass, and Luther Burden had, I think, 60 receiving yards, and he had a big rush, ended up with 50 yards rushing, including a touchdown on the ground. So they're starting to use him in different ways just to get the ball in his hands,
Mm-hmm.
I think he builds upon it, and I think this is the first game we see out of him this year where I think he's not even cleared 100 yards in a game. So I'm banking on the big play potential, and I think he's got to do it. I mean, this team still has an outside playoff chance. They got a game against Alabama in 2 weeks, so they need to get it going this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be rooting for Burton to get over that 100 mark. I thought about going with Luke Haas because if you remember last year, he absolutely burned LSU's defense. He had himself a game. So I'm going to go with Andrew Armstrong, though. He last time that we saw him against Tennessee put up over 100 yards, so he's been the go-to wide receiver for Taylor Green. Taylor Green is questionable. In today's press conference, Sam Pittman was like, "Yeah, we'll check back with me Wednesday if he's playing." So quarterback, who knows who's going to be playing? Is it going to be Taylor Green? Is it going to be the true freshman getting the start, which would definitely not be ideal for Arkansas? So hopefully Taylor Green plays. If he does, I feel more confident with this pick of Andrew Armstrong. You're probably wondering why, if you have Garrett Nussmeier, then why should not go with an LSU wide receiver? Well, I took Kyron Lacey last week, so I'm going to go for new face. Andrew Armstrong, he has been picked. So you know what? I'm just going to be rooting for points in that one. So Luther Burden and Andrew Armstrong are your top two wide receivers for this week. All right, now let's go on to the defenses. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off here. You're going to rock with Vanderbilt's defense, probably the best defense. I originally took them, but Wade has been keeping track of our defenses and politely said, nope, sir, you cannot take Vanderbilt. I'll take Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt against Ball State. I'm going to go with Florida. You know, Florida's defense played really well against Tennessee. They get a Kentucky offense that's just not very good. They get them in the swamp. So Vanderbilt, is this going to be the week that your defense doesn't give up like 40 points and 400 yards of offense?
Look, if it's got to be Vanderbilt that stops it, it's got to be Vanderbilt. I mean, I went with the surefire Georgia Bulldogs defense, Alabama's defense back-to-back weeks, and didn't get it. So never did I think I would pick the Vanderbilt Commodores as my show-stopping defense, but they got to be that. I mean, I got to get back to the point where my defenses are letting up at least under 300. So, yeah, I think they got a good chance against a MAC team. I hate to do it to you, but look, I'm desperate at defense. So let's see what we can get.
Yeah, Ball State's 2-4, so they're not that great. So we'll be rooting for you for your defense to finally show up. I probably went with the second best defense that you could have gone. You could have either went with Kentucky or Florida. You really just depending on who wins that game. It's probably going to spoil who I'm going to be picking. But you know what? Florida's defense, I wasn't going to touch like any of the other games because all the other games are just going to be high scoring shootouts. So you know what? I'll go with Florida. It'll probably be like a 14-10 game. Graham Mertz is out for the season now. It's DJ Lagway's team. So who knows? There's probably not going to be many points. So I just went with the defense and the defensive battle. So give me the Gators, and hopefully, you know, they don't suck and give up, you know, like I swear, if they give up like 30 yards and like 500 yards of defense, I guess it's just my turn to suffer this fate. I've been pretty consistent with the defenses, so we'll see if Florida can continue that. Hopefully, Vanderbilt can slay some demons for you and get under 300 yards of offense. So we will see what they can do against Ball State. So that is our SEC fantasy teams. We'll keep track of that throughout the weekend and give y'all score updates on next week's show. So now let's go on to our games to recap, and let's start off with the first one. We start off our Saturday with a good one with South Carolina at number 7, Alabama. Alabama was the 21.5-point favorite in this one, and South Carolina coming off of a tough one at home against Ole Miss, losing 27-3. Alabama, as we all know, coming off of that tough loss against Vanderbilt. What is this team going to look like? And they did not look too hot, especially in the second half. I mean, South Carolina, they were able to run all over Alabama's defense with Raheem Sanders. Lenore Sellers, well, he ultimately sold the game for this one. Let's just say that he did not have himself a good game against Alabama. But South Carolina's defense was the story in this one. Jalen Milroe, they had that first touchdown, the first drive. But outside of that, not too really many big plays. South Carolina, you thought that they were dead in the water in the fourth quarter, but they got a field goal, and then they went ahead and kicked the onside kick. They recovered the onside kick, and then Lenore Sellers just threw up a prayer, and Alabama picked it off as Alabama won 27-25. So this was a crazy game. Feels like Alabama, you know, usually we saw Nick Saban like coming off of a loss. They just hammered them. And now only a 2-point victory against South Carolina. Should we start to be concerned with this Alabama team moving forward?
I'm not concerned about them. I think we just got to temper the expectations. I mean, we saw them beat Georgia. Both teams were undefeated. We kind of figured it was like probably the second best football game we'd see all year behind maybe Georgia and Texas. And we just assumed that those were like two of the top 5 teams in the country. And, maybe they're not. Maybe they're just playoff caliber teams that aren't super dominant. So I don't know. Maybe Alabama is not the 7th best team in the country. Maybe they're more like the 12th or 13th or something. I think this team's still very good. I just don't think they're the dominant team that everybody's lining up to face for the best win in program history. I think those days are gone. Now for Vanderbilt, maybe it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that this team is still pretty good. I think they can still hang with just about anybody in the country, outside of maybe Texas and Ohio State. Although Ohio State got beat this week. But for South Carolina on their side,
You got to feel for them. Like they had like 2 big wins in their grasp, and they just let it go.
And that's just what it's like for this program. Unfortunately, it just, South Carolina can field a good team, a competitive team, and come so close in these games. And it just felt like destiny might be on their side with the last second touchdown and then the onside recovery and then just a freshman making a freshman mistake on the interception.
Like he just needed they didn't even need a touchdown, just
you didn't need it on that play.
range.
You had time.
I was like,
you didn't need a touchdown. You needed 3 points.
Yeah, so I didn't understand the heave. I mean, there was still plenty of time. I know that you only had one. I mean, you had one timeout left to use, so it wasn't like the. And in college, if you get a first down, the clock stops. It's not like in the NFL, which is a running clock. But South Carolina, they're 3-3, but honestly, they don't really feel like a 3-3 team. They've been playing really well outside of that Ole Miss game.
You want to have on the schedule.
Yeah, definitely not going forward. I mean, this game coming up with Oklahoma, I know it's a road game, but it won't be easy for Oklahoma the way that they've been looking. But South Carolina, like I mentioned, play Oklahoma this week. Alabama, they got a tough one on the road in a hostile environment in Neyland Stadium. So we'll see if South Carolina can finally get that win that they need to get closer to bowl eligibility. Because if they don't get against Oklahoma, who knows when they're going to get it. But Alabama, hopefully we see a better start for them because there's been a lot of slow starts outside that Georgia game. So we'll see what the Tide can do this week. Going on to our next one, our first of 2 overtime games that we're going to be chatting about. 17-23 was the score in this one. Number 8 Tennessee. They were a heavy favorite, 16.5. That was a story. Heavy favorites were definitely challenged in this one. Florida, big story out of this game. Graham Merritt, he's out for the season. He tore his ACL, so prayers up to him. But now the future. So it's going to be his team moving forward. So we'll see how this Florida Gator team. But I was very impressed with this defense. You saw Dylan Sampson, he had himself a game. But outside of that, Nico and this offense just hasn't been the same ever since that NC State game when they put up 51. Like the past couple of weeks with Oklahoma, they struggled obviously with Arkansas in the loss. And now with Florida, Florida was up 10-0 to start this one. Tennessee got blanked at the half. And then Tennessee, they were able to tie it up after Florida went up 17-10, and then we went in overtime. Florida ended up missing a field goal, and that set up the Tennessee 1-yard touchdown run by who other than Dylan Sampson in this one. So like Alabama, it feels like Tennessee, they're now, I know that they're outside of the top 10, but Tennessee, they're coming off of a tough loss. I get it with Arkansas, but coming at home, it's a rivalry game against Florida, a team that desperately needs a win. And I feel like this was a game that they were going to make a statement, but we just don't see it as Tennessee wins this one 23-17. So what are your overall thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I just can't figure out why Tennessee's offense lost its swagger. Like Oklahoma game, it was on the road. They have a decently tough defense. We kind of excused it. And then they played Arkansas on the road. And again, it's a road game. Arkansas's defense has improved. We kind of excused it, but is this who they are? Look, Dylan Sampson is bailing out his quarterback because
bailing out the team pretty much.
Yeah, the whole team, and the defense remains really good. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened. I thought this offense was going to be at the top of the conference, and thought they had a top 3 quarterback in the league, and I just think it shows how open the SEC really is right now. But this is a team that I would want to play sooner than later because I do think they'll figure it out. But if you could hit them with a second loss, I think Alabama, as many concerns as they have equally on their side. I mean, I think this is a good time for them to play Tennessee on the road because right now Tennessee just doesn't have it. I'm not really scared to play this team. I'd be much more scared to play some of the other higher ranked teams. I'd be more scared to play LSU at this point, or even Texas A&M.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Florida, they got a big one at home against Kentucky. That feels like a must win for both teams if they do want to go have any postseason shot. And then Tennessee, like I mentioned, they get Alabama at home this week. So that's a big game for both Tennessee and Alabama. We'll definitely talk about that game, but we do have 2 more games to get to. It feels like defense in every single game this weekend that we're going to be talking about as Vanderbilt goes on the road 20-13. We all took Kentucky outside of Chet. He was the lone anchor down on that one. We were saying like, all right, this is just Kentucky.
It's a good story, but it's not going to last.
Yeah, this is Kentucky. They're coming off of a bye week. Vanderbilt, they're coming off of an emotional win. This just feels like a letdown spot, but nope. Vanderbilt and Diego Pavia. He just has the magic powers of just Vanderbilt being a really good football team down the stretch here as they get another huge victory. And they're now 4-2 on the season. Kentucky drops to 3-3. So you have a tie there with South Carolina and Kentucky. Not like it matters. Not like it's the SEC East and SEC West. But still a defensive battle between 2 teams that play really good defense and 2 teams that just rely heavily on their run game. So I know that you and I were definitely surprised to see Vanderbilt get in the win column. But, hey, I mean, this is now back-to-back weeks that we're talking possibly about Vanderbilt. So this might just be the year of the Commodores here in SEC talk.
Yeah, I mean, look, this team has really stepped it up. We thought they'd kind of get lost with the new conference realignment. Like they were just holding on for dear life. But here they are. And hell, if they beat Georgia State, I mean, they would have looking at a bowl game. Yeah, or have a playoff chance.
Yeah.
But no, this is a really good win. I mean, this is a game that you could reasonably expect Vanderbilt to win going into the season. But I think this is a true benchmark of their pecking order in the conference. We saw Kentucky beat Ole Miss and give Georgia a scare. So for Vanderbilt to prove that, they're not just a one-hit wonder with the Alabama victory, that they can go on the road and beat a team that's given some other top teams some trouble, I think that puts them firmly in the middle of the pack of the conference. I don't think they're a bottom 4 team. I think they're probably right there at maybe 7 or 8. Maybe even if they're 9 or 10, I mean, I think that's a really good spot to be at this point in the season, and I think this team could be looking at a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, if that happens, Clark Lee is going to be one of our nominees for SEC Coach of the Year. It feels like it's going to be Steve Sarkisian, Clark Lee, and who else is going to be on there? We will definitely have to find out as the season goes on. May be Mike Elko, depending on how Texas A&M finishes. But yeah, I mean, after Kentucky played really 2 quality opponents in Ole Miss and Georgia, Vanderbilt went into them, and they played some defense. And we haven't seen that in years past for this Vanderbilt team. Their defense has been traveling this season. So they get Ball State, and they get number 1 Texas in 2 weeks. So I swear, man, if they do it again, then Vanderbilt, Clark Lee, you're automatic. I'm not even going to put the SEC Coach of the Year for vote. It's just going to be Clark Lee because that man – has been coaching his tail off this season. So very good victory for Vanderbilt. Kentucky, they could definitely say their season. They have some wins. They got to get this one in the swamp if they do want to go bowling this season. All right, let's get to our SEC talk game of the week. And man, what a game it was. Probably the game of the week outside of the Oregon-Ohio State game. That also came down to the wire. Number 9, Ole Miss at number 13, LSU in the Magnolia Bowl. Some crazy moments in this rivalry game. Last year, we had the 55-49 game. We were thinking, oh, is it going to be again? Nope. We're actually going to have more defense this year, which was definitely a nice thing. So 29-26. Wade, how was this game shaped out? You were in Tiger Stadium, an electric atmosphere. They had the light show, the celebration of 100 years. They brought back the spring game field design in the end zones. So talk about how this game shaped down and how you saw it from your point of view.
Yeah, it was just for all the reasons you mentioned, just absolutely fantastic. And I think that the fans definitely factored into it. LSU made some really big plays on defense that got the fans energized, and the offense hung around. I mean, they moved the ball enough to chip away, get a field goal here, a field goal there, and I think one of the big turning points was the late fumble recovery in the second quarter, right before halftime. It allowed LSU to get another field goal and keep it within a possession. So I think that was really huge. And even Lane Kiffin going into halftime, I heard he was like, well, that's just a fluke. Like we'll be in good shape. And I think he kind of undersold how big of a moment that was, because I think it gave the team and the fans alike a lot of hope for the second half. And Garrett Nussmeier got better as the game went along, and he kind of fed into that energy. And he was just a man on a mission with those final 2 possessions. I mean, he did not back down. 2 fourth down conversions on the drive. It kept feeling like LSU was taking a shot at the end zone when maybe they didn't need to. You're 20 or 30 yards out. They kept running post routes, trying to get the big play, and they didn't hit on many of them, but man, they hit on it when it counted, with the beautiful pass to Aaron Anderson for the touchdown from 25 yards out. And then on the very next offensive possession to Kyron Lacey. So maybe they saw something there that they liked, and they just couldn't get it to hit all game, but it sure did when it mattered, right? So just a really terrific victory for LSU. And for Ole Miss, I mean, they might already be out, but if they're
out
not,
of the SEC championship, that's for sure, because they're 1-2 now in the SEC. They still have Georgia. They got a road date with Arkansas. And you can't forget about Mississippi State. I mean, the Egg Bowl is just crazy. I know how down bad.
Even if they were undefeated going there, I mean, Mississippi
State's starting to find themselves. Like, this offense is starting to find their identity. I know that the defense isn't where it needs to be, but you cannot count Mississippi State out in that Egg Bowl. So Ole Miss with 2 losses, we'll talk to them. That's one of our hot topics, but they are now on the bye week. Literally, like I said last week, this is one of the main reasons why I did pick LSU, because LSU was coming off the bye week. This was Ole Miss's 7th straight game, and this was they had back-to-back road games. Last week they went to Columbia, now hostile environment LSU. So they played really well. Feels like they probably should have won that one. You saw in the press conference that Jackson Dart was just shell shocked that they lost that game. And that's what Tiger Stadium does to you, man. That's why they say opponent's dreams come to die. That's feels like Ole Miss's playoff chances came to die if they do not win out. So Ole Miss head to the bye. LSU heads to Fayetteville. Another big matchup between the Hogs and the Tigers. And we'll get to that game in a couple of minutes. So we'll see how the teams did. Let's see how our picks did. Look at that, 6-1 across the board. So I thought they were going to get undefeated, but I believe the game that I can't even remember. I knew that Chet, he picked up his with Vanderbilt, and yeah, that's right. We lost because we picked Kentucky. So if we just picked Vanderbilt, we would have gone 7-0. Maybe one of us will go undefeated. So that is our Week 7 recap. Those are our pick'em results. And now let's turn the page to week number 8 as we look to our Week 8 games and pick'em. Let's start with the 11 a.m. game, the Battle of the Tigers. Auburn at number 19, Missouri. Auburn is coming off of the bye week, and they need a win desperately. Going on the road to an environment that's definitely going to be rowdy as a number 19 Missouri. Bounce back after getting blown out in College Station, 45-3 win against UMass. And if you watch them entering the locker room, it looks like they were entering a middle school locker room instead of a college locker room. So Auburn, Missouri, who you got in this one?
I know that you can't look too far into the UMass game, but I think Missouri found out a little bit about their offense and what they want to
Beat
do.
Luther Burden. That's what they found out.
Yep. You got the future first rounder on your team, and whatever you got to do to get in his head to play to his ability, you got to do. So I think Missouri takes this. They just have way too many weapons to lose to a team like Auburn.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Missouri. Auburn's a team that just hasn't shown much, and usually I like to pull these road upsets. But I mean, the way that this Auburn team's been moving the ball, it's not going to be able to keep up with Missouri. Missouri, I know it's UMass, but they really needed that one after getting punched in the mouth to put up 40 points against UMass. Just Brady Cook, he found his rhythm again. So if they can win this one, get some momentum going into the Alabama game, so give me Missouri. Jets going to go at Missouri there. So we're all rolling with the Tigers against the Tigers. So now let's go on to the next one, South Carolina at Oklahoma. This is definitely a weird matchup that I haven't seen in quite some time. As South Carolina coming off of a tough loss again, back-to-back losses for the Gamecocks, Oklahoma. This feels like two teams that desperately need a win as well, as we'll get into another game that feels the same. So South Carolina, Oklahoma. You going to go with the road team, or do you think that the Sooners get a victory at home here?
I like the timing for Oklahoma. I mean, South Carolina has played 3 really tough games in a row now, including this one and the Alabama one on the road. But South Carolina has also really impressed me in all of those games, minus the Ole Miss one. And I just think luck has to go their way. So I'm going to go with the Gamecocks. Originally, I'd picked Oklahoma to win this game. But after seeing what South Carolina did against Alabama and what they did against LSU, something's got to bend in their direction. Yeah. And Oklahoma, they're still figuring out a lot in their own right. So I think this game's going to be kind of sluggish. You got 2 mobile dual threat quarterbacks. And I just think that a lack of overall weapons on the perimeter will just make this game very run focused for both teams. But give me South Carolina on a wacky special teams play. I mean, I'm picking this game to be really low scoring. I think it's going to be like 23-17 South Carolina.
Yeah, it's going to be a low scoring game where both defenses are going to have their way, and somebody on offense is going to have to make a big play. And it'll probably come down to the running backs, as both quarterbacks haven't been playing too well. I'll probably have to assume it'd be Michael Hawkins. I don't know if they're going to go back to Jackson Arnold. They've been going back and forth, it feels like, all season. But I know that you said that South Carolina ultimately is going to win this game. They need a big win, but so does Oklahoma. I'm just going to go with the home team here. These are 2 evenly matched teams. I just think that Oklahoma coming back home after getting punched in the mouth against Texas, so they're going to regroup, and this defense is going to step up to the challenge and get a late pick or a late fumble or a late interception to seal this one. So give me the Sooners. And Chet's also going with South Carolina, so I'm the lone Oklahoma. So that could definitely tail the tail there on their pick'em results. So we'll see how this game goes down. I'll definitely be excited to watch this one at 2:30. Now let's go on to the next one. This is not our SEC talk game of the week. We have a bigger one, but this is still a big one for college football playoff implications for both of these teams, especially since Alabama and Tennessee already have 1 loss. Number 7, Alabama at number 11, Tennessee. We saw last year Tennessee get out fast, but Alabama ultimately won the game. The last time this game was in Knoxville, it was one of the crazier college football games that you ever seen. So what fireworks will we get on this season's edition of Alabama and Tennessee?
Maybe not that many, with the way that Alabama's offense has kind of sputtered as of late, and Tennessee's defense remains really top notch. And I'm going to go ahead and claim this to be the get back game for Nico. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen far inferior quarterbacks, or at least guys that we think are inferior to Nico, light it up against Alabama. I'm not saying he's going to throw for 350 yards, but I think he'll be in control of the game. I think he'll move the ball down the field and throw for at least 2 touchdowns in this one. And what Tennessee can do with their defense and with Dylan Sampson is just keep the ball out of Jalen Milroe's hands. I mean, just run the clock on offense and then rely on that.
What South
that stout
Carolina did.
defense. What's that?
That's what South Carolina and pretty much
Yeah.
Vanderbilt have done. So they might just steal that game plan again.
You got a way better running back than both of those teams, and you have a better quarterback. So if you can get those guys in balance, the game plan's right there, like you said. So I'm going to bet on Tennessee to figure that out. And if they can't, then I'm writing this team off for the rest of the season. It's do or die for Tennessee. For Alabama, I mean, you got the big win on your resume against Georgia. That certainly helps. But if you lose, I mean, your playoff hopes are definitely in doubt with the 2 losses.
For sure. I mean, the loser of this one, they're going to have to go perfect the rest of the way if they do want to make the college football playoff. Because if you feel like, if you're 10-2 in the SEC, you're probably safe. But 9-3, you're definitely out of it. The way that the rest of the college football landscape is shaping out, because there's going to be a lot of one-loss teams. There are not going to be too many undefeated teams as long as either Oregon or Texas ends up running the table. But these are 2 evenly matched teams. Tennessee is definitely going to try and run the ball. Maybe they'll steal Vanderbilt's and South Carolina's game plan and just handing Dylan Sampson the ball because if Alabama can't stop the run, then that's exactly what Tennessee is going to do. But I think that Nico, if Tennessee is going to win this one, Nico is going to have himself a good game. But Alabama side, Jalen Milroe definitely has to step up in this one. Ryan Williams, we didn't really hear too much about him in the South Carolina game. He feels like a big piece if Alabama is going to win this one. But Tennessee was one of my dark horse teams heading into the season, and I had this game circled. And before the season, I had Tennessee win this one, and nothing's changed. I'm definitely on the fence with both of these teams. They haven't really impressed me in the past couple of weeks, but I'm going to go with Tennessee in a low-scoring game like 24-21. Going to be a close battle. And this is not good at all. We're all going with Tennessee. So congratulations, Alabama, on your victory, as we're all picking Tennessee to win this one. So let's go on now to the next one, number 14, Texas A&M at Mississippi State. Mississippi State coming off of a tough loss on the road in Athens against Georgia. Texas A&M, they're fresh off of the bye week. Mississippi State was just off of the bye week before they returned to play Georgia. So Texas A&M, do you have them continuing their winning streak, or do you have Mississippi State getting their second win on the season?
I mean, this one has upset potential. Mississippi State looked pretty good with the freshman Van Buren at quarterback against Georgia. But I just don't trust that defense at all. And I think Texas A&M is a lot better on offense than I gave them credit for. So I think that A&M could air it out with Wagman. I think they could run it 25 times with Moss. However you want to skin the cat, I think they get it done. A&M has their eyes on that game against LSU next week. But as long as they don't look past Mississippi State here, I think that they'll be in business.
Yeah, the line here is 15 to the Aggies. So Vegas just doesn't see anything with this Mississippi State team. But they are improving. Van Buren, they definitely found their guy moving forward. I feel like this offense is finding them identity. Coleman has definitely been their wide receiver to really target it. But their defense, like I mentioned, with Le'Veon Moss in the backfield, who knows how they're going to be able to stop them. So this might, like I said, this is why I feel like I know that Texas A&M's defense is good, but something tells me we always see a shootout between these two teams. And you know what? Give me the upset. Mississippi State's due for a big victory. So I think that, coming back at home, and they showed me, I mean, it's not like they got boat raced by Texas and Mississippi State at all. I know that Texas, they put up 31 on them, and then they put up 31 against Georgia. So I think that this offense is starting to find themselves. As long as their defense can at least get a couple of stops to make this game close, then I think that Mississippi State can pull off the unthinkable. Because Texas A&M is all right, we just beat Missouri. We're walking into a team that's 1-5. We can win this one. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next week. and that's when Mississippi State gets you. So give me the huge upset. And Chet's not seeing any upsets as he's going with Texas A&M. So there you have it, back-to-back games where we're all picking, not picking the same teams with Texas A&M, Mississippi State there. So that will be a big one to watch in the standings. See if there's any more for this week. So Ball State at Vanderbilt. I'm guessing we're all going with Vanderbilt, especially you, since you're going with their defense. I don't think that you'll be picking them if you see Ball State winning this one. So I'm guessing you're going to go with the Doors.
Going with the Doors. When's the last time we can say we're all going with the Doors?
Yeah, well, you can say it now because we're all going with the Doors against the Ball State Cardinals, who are a solid 2-4 on the season. They're definitely out of the MACtion race. The MACtion's definitely heating up. They're back on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so we will definitely have to keep an eye on who ultimately wins that conference. But Vanderbilt is just another one. Get to win and get back to maybe shocking the world as you have number 1 Texas coming into your building next week. So this is not really a tune-up. This is just a get ready for the next week and see if you can shock the world once again. So now let's go on to the next game, number 8, LSU at Arkansas, the battle for the Golden Boot. It feels like every time that these two teams match up, comes down to the wire. Last year, it came down to Damian Ramos' field goal at the end, and then 2 years ago, it was 13-10, an ultimate slugfest. So where are we going to get from these two teams?
I think you're going to see a close game. I mean, I think this is one of the
It always is
underrated road trips. It used to be kind of the furthest north you would go in the conference. Everybody sees Arkansas on a map, but you forget that it's that the school itself is in the upper northwestern corner of the state, and it takes about 8 hours to get there from Baton Rouge. So it's definitely a longer trip than people think, with it being a border game. It always finds its way to be right after one of LSU's big victories or right before a big game. And, well, what do you have? You have a Ole Miss upset and a game against A&M coming up next week. So I'm very wary of this one, but I do think LSU has more skill, player talent, and I think this team's going to edge it out. But I'm not sure what the spread is on this one, but I see it being less than a 7-point game.
LSU is 3.5 the last time that I checked.
I think that's pretty appropriate.
Yeah, it's pretty appropriate. I mean, it feels like every year it's like comes down to the last minute, whether that's a field goal or a late touchdown that a team needs. So both defenses have been playing pretty well. Last time we saw Arkansas, they really shut down the Tennessee offense, and in LSU, they honestly shut down the Ole Miss offense. I mean, they really struggled, especially in the second half. I know they got going in the first half, going up 10-0 in that game. So this is going to be another low-scoring game that LSU just got to get to. It's another, for LSU, like you mentioned, you bring up a good point. They are coming off an emotional win. Meanwhile, Arkansas, they're coming off of a bye, so they're going to be fresh. But we'll see if Taylor Green is going to be playing in this one, because that's going to be huge. Because if he doesn't,
that might change things.
Yeah, that could definitely change things. But I'm still going to go with LSU. I definitely think that this offense, the way that they've been rolling, I think that, Arkansas's defense is definitely going to step up for sure. But this is going to be like a 20-17 type of game, something like that. So give me LSU and a tight one, as it always is. And Chet is going to go with the Tigers. So all rolling with the purple and gold this week. And the next one is our SEC Talk game of the week. It's a night game in Austin, Texas. Number 5, Georgia, at number 1, Texas. Could this be a preview of what we see in the SEC Championship? Time will tell. So Georgia, Texas, I know that you're pretty high on Texas, so you're going to continue to pick the Longhorns here.
Yeah, I mean, they've given me no reason not to. And Georgia's defense is just
yikes.
I mean, I honestly don't think they're a top 5 defense in the league, and that's not because there's 4 teams really pushing at them for the top spot. I mean, the defense has just kind of been down across the board in the conference, and Georgia's definitely got a liability there. They're young. I think they have the talent to pull it together, but a road game in Austin's not the time they're going to do that.
Nope.
A veteran quarterback like Quinn Ewers, he knocked the rust off last week. They didn't
He
even
always
have to.
does well in these type of big games too. It's like
This is what he's meant for.
So yeah, I'm gonna go with Texas too. This just feels like a Texas. I don't know what the line is. I feel pretty confident. I think that Texas just continues to roll here. I mean,
I think it's
Georgia,
going to
they
be a
got to get off
14
to a
point win.
fast start because if they get down 20-0 against Texas, you're not going to be able to do what you did against Alabama because once you get Texas rolling, it's hard to stop them. And like you mentioned, Georgia, their defense has been struggling the past couple of weeks. Outside of that Kentucky game, they gave up over 30. They gave up 40 to Alabama, and then they almost gave up 40 again to Mississippi State. So what is going on with that defensive side? So I think that Texas wins this one pretty convincingly. I know it's a top 5 game, but Texas, I think they're just a better football team all around. So give me Texas at home. Jets going with Texas too. This is a big environment, but we're all picking Texas to win this top 5 battle. So this might another loss here with Georgia. I mean, they still got Ole Miss. They already have 2 losses after that one. That would definitely not be a good sign for Kirby Smart looking at the college football playoff. But for Texas, if they win this one, feels like they're just going to walk into the college football playoff at this point, the way that they're going. Let's go on to the next one, our final one here in week number 8, Kentucky at Florida, another rivalry game that we get at night. So you picking in this one, it feels like they just need one of these teams just really needs to win to get going here. So who you got between the Cats and the Gators?
I mean, historically, Kentucky's really struggled to go on the road and win in Florida. But I just think with the quarterback injury, I know Lagway's played some, but this is his first real, hey, I'm the guy. I don't have Mertz watching over my shoulder. And I think that could go one of 2 ways. I think he could really impress us, but I'm going to bank on the side that it takes him a little time to grow. I'm going to go with Kentucky here on the road. I think last week's game showed more about Vanderbilt than it did Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky's gone on the road and beaten Ole Miss. They held their own against Georgia. So I don't think this team's too bad. I don't think they're that great, but I think they get it done.
So you're rolling with Big Blue. I'm not. I'm going to go with the other blue, go with Florida.
Lots of disagreements this week.
Yeah, there is. So I'm interested to see how the pick'em results are going to be. But I think that DJ Lagway, I've always said, I know I hated for Graham Mertz, but, DJ Lagway, he definitely has an arm talent too. And he's able to if your first plays in there, he's able to beat you with his legs. So I think that this is going to be another defensive game. Wouldn't surprise me if we get literally the same score, like 20-13 that we saw last week's game with Kentucky in Vanderbilt. But both of these offenses just doesn't feel like they've been having to find an identity. Montreal Johnson, it feels like he's been quiet the past couple of weeks. So I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, but give me the home team of Florida in this rivalry game that, like you mentioned, was dominated by Florida. And then past couple of years, Kentucky's been able to get a couple of wins. But give me the home team, go with the Gators. Jets going to go with Florida. So you're the lone Kentucky Wildcat on this one. I'm going to definitely be interested to see how our picks shape out and who wins the week. So before we close the show, we do have some hot topics to get to. Our first one, Ole Miss, they sit at 5-2 heading into the bye week. My preseason pick is looking not too great right now because I had Ole Miss winning the SEC. That's not looking too good. You're from Texas. I mean, golly, it looks like they're just waltzing to Atlanta at this point. But at this point in the season, can Ole Miss still make the playoff? Like I mentioned, they still have a road date with Arkansas and then Georgia. And then obviously, like I mentioned, can't forget about the Egg Bowl. So with all that being said, do you think that at the end of the season, will Ole Miss be a playoff team? If they're not, would that be a failure?
I mean, Ole Miss still has a clear path to being a 3rd or 4th best team in the conference. They need some help. I mean, they probably just need Texas to go ahead and dominate the SEC and win outright, and give them one spot. And then they need, obviously, Georgia to lose to Texas this weekend, and then they need to go beat Georgia themselves. I mean, any scenario for playoffs means Ole Miss has to win out. And then they need, whoever wins between Tennessee and Alabama, they just need the winner of that game to trip up later in the season, which could happen. So I think more realistically, you're trying to become the 3rd or the 4th best team in the conference, and I think that's feasible. But right now they just don't pass the eye test to me as a playoff team. So no, I'm going to say they will not make the playoff, but yes, they still can.
Yeah, I still think that they can, but will they? I just don't see. I mean, road day with Arkansas. That's going to be tough. And then Georgia. Who knows what Georgia's going to be looking like? I mean, especially if they lose this one to Texas, like what is their mindset going to be heading into that one? So that could definitely be like a win in your in scenario for Ole Miss and Georgia season if they both have 2 losses heading into that matchup. The next one, do we have Vanderbilt going bowling? They currently sit at 4-2. Looks like we're all taking them to win, so that would move them to 5-2. So they would just need one more win. So do we have the Commodores going to the Music City Bowl or something this season?
Look, if they make a bowl game, I hope they send them to Florida or somewhere.
Yeah, I hope so too. Like, give them a vacation or something. Come on.
Yeah, don't make them play at the Titan Stadium. But yeah, I think so. I mean, I saw loosely looking at their schedule, they play Auburn, I believe, and South Carolina, which are winnable SEC games for them. And then I think they have one more. Maybe no.
I think
they
they
might
have
not
Tennessee
have another
at the end of the season.
Yeah, Tennessee. But yeah, I think so. This team's at 4 wins right now, so 2 more. I think they can do it.
They got Ball State this week, so it feels like they're going to have to beat the Cardinals this week. So let's go on to the next one. It feels like every media is talking about this. Is it Texas and everyone else? It feels like in the SEC.
Not only just in the SEC anymore,
in the nation,
to me, but the whole nation. Because to me, Texas and Ohio State were, pick the one you liked more off the eye test 1 and 2. Not saying Ohio State's out of it. I mean, they lost in pretty heartbreaking fashion, but they lost. So yeah, I think Texas is the only team that is legitimately undefeated and a threat to win the national championship. You could say, well, what about Oregon? And sure, maybe, but I just don't have them on the same level as Texas. And beyond that, I mean, you got to look at the Big 12 for your other undefeateds and
BYU and Iowa State.
I don't think you can say they're in the same conversation. And then you look at Boise State, Navy, Army. I mean, it really is Texas and everybody else.
It definitely feels that way. I thought the same thing. I thought it was Texas and Ohio State, and then Ohio State trips up. Maybe it's Oregon, but Oregon definitely has some tough games down the road. But it feels like Texas, if they win this one against Georgia, feels like ultimate lock that they're going to make the college football playoff. I mean, it had to be an absolute miracle. They would have to implode down the stretch. So yeah, it feels like they win this one, take care of business against Georgia. This might be a team that we're looking at their first year in the SEC. They make to Atlanta, could be playing for a berth and possibly the number 1 seed, and looking pretty well down the stretch. So next one, I know that Garrett Nussmeier was named today the SEC Player of the Week, but who is our Player of the Week? Wade, take it away with your pick.
I'm gonna keep it in that game because I think it was the most impactful. But I'm going to go to the defensive side. I'm going to go with Whit Weeks, the linebacker. You could also make a case for Braden Swinson. So I just think the defense is what gave Nussmeier the chance in this one. And he stepped it up and made the plays. But let's not forget, I mean, he really struggled for 3/4 of this football game.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought about going with that one. I figured that you would go with him. So I'm going to go with a different one and go with Carson Beck. I know it's Mississippi State, but every time that you put up 459 passing yards in the SEC, that's pretty good. I know he had 2 interceptions in that one. That's what ultimately flipped the game. But Carson Beck really need that one because, Carson Beck heading into the season, he was potential first round draft pick in the NFL, top 5 pick, and then, early Heisman favorite, but he hasn't really shown it. He showed it against Mississippi State. If he's honestly going to need that performance against Texas because if Georgia feels like if they are going to beat Texas, they might just have to go into old-fashioned high-scoring shootout, which Georgia isn't too used to doing, especially the way that their defenses are playing the past couple of years. But Whit Weeks and Carson Beck is our players of the week here in the SEC. So we do have some 2 comments to get to. Let's get to those before we close the show out here. Let's see what it is, who it's from, what's up, and then we got our boy Frazier Blunt. Woo, sports. Yep, we definitely love sports. Definitely like watching that every single week. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in to this week's edition of SEC Talk. We went over an hour, but you know what? This is how crazy SEC football was this week. So next week, we will recap week 8 and look forward to week number 9 as we'll get into some more conference games. The 2 games that we're definitely going to be recapping is Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia and Alabama, because the winner of that will still be in the college football playoff race. The loser will be playing for the rest of the season pretty much. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of your week, and we will see y'all next time right here on SEC Talk.